They say silence is the most terrifying sound. In the Menendez brothers' house, that silence was broken one night by blood, and from that moment on, America was no longer the same country. It was a hot August evening in 1989. 2 gunshots broke the silence in a huge mansion in Beverly Hills, California. When the police arrived at the scene, they found Jose Menendez and his wife Kitty dead in the living room of the house. Their bodies were covered in blood. The TV was still on. There were unfinished drinks on the table, but it was as if time had stopped. In an instant, everything changed. A few minutes later, 2 young boys entered the house through the door. Eric and Lyle Menendez. They screamed as if their world had collapsed. "Dad! Mom!" they shouted. The police tried to calm them down. At that moment, no one thought that these 2 boys could have killed their parents a few hours earlier. But yes, they were behind this incident. But why? Why did 2 sons kill their parents? As terrible as it may sound, the answer to this question is not as easy as you might think, because sometimes pain is hidden in the crime. Jose Menendez was a wealthy but very cruel father. From the outside, he seemed like a successful businessman, an exemplary family man. But when the doors of the house were closed, that family turned into hell, not heaven. Years later, Eric said in court, crying, "He scared us. Sometimes he beat us so much that I could not breathe. I was afraid to sleep in bed as a child." His words froze those in the hall, because at that moment everyone understood that this was not just a murder, but the result of years of fear. For years, silence had reigned in the house. Their mother, Kitty, was a quiet but helpless woman. She was also afraid. Eric said, "My mother saw, but she didn't say anything. It was as if she was a victim." And so, years of fear, hatred, and loneliness that had accumulated over the years exploded one night. In the evening, the brothers sat at home, remembering the insults their father had said to them, looking at each other, and Lyle said, "Either this will end tonight or we will never wake up again." They took the gun. They went inside. The first shot was fired, then another and another. Their mother heard a noise and ran into the room, saw her sons. And at that moment, there was no fear in her eyes, but an expression like, "Finally, it's over." But it was too late. The police initially interpreted the incident differently. Maybe it was the mafia, maybe their business rivals. Such a wealthy family had many enemies. But over time, everything became clear. The brothers' behavior, their expensive expenses, their luxurious life, everything raised suspicions. They acted as if they had breathed a sigh of relief after the murder. Lyle bought a new Rolex, Eric drove an expensive car, as if they had thrown off the noose that had been around their necks for years. But the truth could not remain hidden for long. Eric told his psychologist the secret he had been carrying for years. "We did it, but you don't know what we went through." The psychologist couldn't keep this secret. He reported it to the police, and thus the whole of America trembled. Televisions talked about this event for days. Newspapers appeared in the media with the headline, "Menendez Brothers." The trial lasted for years. One side said, they were cold-blooded killers. The other side said, no, they are victims of oppression. In the hall, a young man cries, talking about his past, while the other calmly looks at his brother. There are thousands of words in his eyes, but he doesn't speak. Judges, lawyers, and society were puzzled. Where is the fault? In the father? In the sons? Or in the society that sees this silence and remains silent? The decision was made in 1996. Both brothers were sentenced to life imprisonment. They were now like two different victims of the same murder. One had killed, the other had killed himself. The moment the prison door closed, it seemed like everything was over, but in fact the story had just begun. Lyle was on one side, Eric on the other. They had been kept apart for years. Eric didn't speak for a while, he just watched. He had nightmares at night. Every time his mother's voice said, "Why?" To him, he kept repeating, Lyle was tougher. Although he pretended to be calm, there were storms inside. The priest had told him, God will forgive you, but first you have to forgive yourself. Lyle hadn't answered, because he had long since lost himself. Years passed. Everyone knew their names. Movies were made, documentaries were broadcast. Some looked at them with hatred. some with understanding. But everyone agreed that this was not just the story of two boys. This was the terrible tragedy of a family. Hundreds of people wrote them letters. Some wrote, "I went through the same thing, only I didn't pull the trigger." Eric wrote in one of the letters, "If my pain helps reduce someone's fear, then this pain has meaning." Lyle got married in prison in 2017. Yes, behind bars. The woman saw his story in a documentary and wrote about it. Their correspondence turned into love. Lyle said, "In freedom, people often hide their feelings, but sometimes, behind bars, feelings are purer." Eric taught young prisoners to read books and be patient. He said, "You make a decision in a moment in your life, and that decision either frees you or kills you. Don't be like me." In 2018, after 22 years, they were finally transferred to the same prison. And look at that moment. The two brothers hugged each other for the first time in years, crying. The camera captured that moment scene by scene. Those shots were broadcast on social networks and TV all over the world. Some said, "This is the theater of two murderers," but most just cried. Because there was humanity there. Everything that the two brothers had lost, everything their past was in that hug. Now they are old. The pain of years is on their faces, but there is a calmness in their eyes. They are no longer running, no longer hiding. Lyle said in an interview, "If someone had listened to us then, maybe this would not have happened." And this sentence is perhaps the most painful sentence in the whole story, because sometimes a person just wants to be listened to, but society often does not listen. Now that house, yes, that famous villa still stands. It has been painted, changed, but the silence of that night is still inside the walls. New residents say that sometimes a woman's voice comes at night. Eric. Maybe it is an imagination, maybe not, but sometimes the past never completely leaves a person. Over time, the Menendez story has become a symbol. In the United States, laws on domestic violence have become stricter, and more attention has been paid to children's complaints. Every time a child says, "I am being beaten at home," people remember the Menendez. Every time someone said, "This family looks so happy," maybe they had a little doubt. But the younger generation had a different view of this story. Thousands of videos were posted on TikTok and YouTube. Young people were saying, "They're not the devil, they're victims of the system." Free Menendez Brothers was trending. People were sharing their letters, understanding them. Just think, even 30 years later, people still couldn't forget this story. Eric wrote in a letter, "I no longer remember my father with hatred but with understanding. He probably went through the same pain. He just couldn't change his cycle." This sentence changed a lot, because at that moment people saw that these two boys were no longer the children of that night, but had learned the lesson of today. Sometimes I think maybe they've served their sentence long ago, because sometimes a prison that's heavier than iron bars is inside a person. They relive that moment every night and wake up every morning with a clear conscience. That's what true punishment is. And now you're listening to this video, maybe you're thinking, what would I do if I were you? Maybe if you were in that house, you'd hear the scream of silence. Remember one thing. If there's a lot of silence in a house, not much has been said there. If everyone in a family is smiling, but their eyes are empty, something is hidden there. The Menendez story taught us this. Silence is sometimes the loudest scream. Yes, this story may have started with blood, but it ended with a lesson. And now a question for you. Do you think a child who grows up in a loveless home is a sinner or a victim?